Greetings. I would like to thank you, Reverend Capo and Carly Pulaski, for inviting me to speak. Alex Golizzi, Joseph Toledo, all the music team and tech team, and everyone involved making this experience possible today virtually. I really am truly honored, and I always love speaking to congregations like yours that have true concern for humanity and are searching for where the Spirit is guiding you towards justice, peace, love, and community. Now, if I could, I would like to take a moment to considering the meaning of renewal, hope, and the future from the context of the Hebrew Scriptures and what that means for us today. It would be an understatement to say that we are in uncertain and tumultuous times. The scourge of the coronavirus pandemic, which has been with us for over 2 years, has shaped a landscape of staggering levels of economic and social inequality for marginalized communities. Our country's struggle with systemic racism and classism, and the fractious effects of war and unrest in Ukraine, Gaza, and the countless conflicts across the globe. Now, as I meditated and discerned what my message would be, my guiding principle was that as long as we are here on this earth, that there was hope. That hope, however, everlasting it may be, comes at a high cost. And finding the willingness to call out what work needs to be done is the key. For me, the prophets of Israel's ancient scriptures delivered the precise message necessary to address the people of Israel and shine a light on the problems of today. The text that I chose from the prophet Malachi in the Hebrew Bible addresses the problems of the people he saw at the time and rebukes them for not being in right relationship to God and to their own community. Now, for some context, the name Malachi roughly translates from the original Hebrew to my messenger and translates as his messenger in the Septuagint. Now, the author of this book is unknown, but biblical scholars date this text to sometime after the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem in 515 BCE. The novelty of the name Malachi also speaks to the unique quality of the text and the importance of its reference to the coming Elijah. While there are many prophetic messages of judgment, there are also many messages of protection, love, and justice. The idea of a messenger or a forerunner for God is brought up before the book of Malachi. In Exodus 23:20, it reads, "I am going to send an angel in front of you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared." Isaiah chapter 40 verses 3 and 4 reads, "A voice cries out, 'In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places made plain." This reference to the way being prepared for a leader or for a messenger also signals that the path needs to be cleared. So Malachi chapter 3, verse 1, opens with the interjection hineni, and that roughly translates to behold. In our context of community, the modern context would be that Malachi has basically said, look out or watch out or hear as an interjective to stop us and jar us and make us pay attention. As if to say that the signal that we're receiving, we won't be ready for what's coming. Now, verses 2 and 3 refer to the smelter's fire or the refiner's fire and a launderer, or in other translations, fuller's soap. Let's take a moment to break down the imagery around a refiner and a fuller. The process of refining metals is a dirty job. It requires high heat, intentionality, particularly for fine metals like gold or silver. If any of you have seen real gold ore or silver up close, it is at first hard to believe that this material would become so precious. But the key here is it's that the pressure and heat bring that about, and that's when the impurities are scooped off. Now, fuller's soap is a special soap that's used by someone that's called a fuller. They cleaned the wool for processing into clothes and other textile applications. Now, this was extremely labor-intensive and dirty work, namely because of the smell of cleaning the wool. It was done outside the towns and set apart. The soap was also extremely caustic and regularly damaged the skin of the fullers who had constant contact with that soap. Well, then what's the significance of the purification of the clothing and the metals? This leads us to the group of people here that are being targeted in the text. The descendants of Levi. These were the temple people who offered up the tithings and offerings as described in the scripture. Their job was integral to the people being in right relationship with God and their fellow human, because they worked in the temple. That work also demands a level of ritual purity, or a word that I think fits a little bit better is ritual preparedness. Now let's take a look at verse 2 again. And there's that word endure. Now, the definition of endure, of course, is to suffer something painful or difficult patiently, or to remain in existence, or to last. I want to focus on that word last for just a moment. Refining jewelry and processing wool for textiles are actions taken to make something built to last. Great jewelry and clothing can have nearly timeless appreciation if they're taken care of. Now, why are the descendants of Levi, the priestly class, so important? Malachi's indictment of them tells us precisely why. They're responsible for taking care of the people. Verse 5 says that they are misusing their positions to lie to the people. They're cheating workers, not taking care of the widow and orphan, taking away the rights of the alien or the foreigner, or in a more modern translation, the immigrants or sojourners in the land. Unfortunately, sounds familiar. The charge is that this is all an affront to God and God's purposes for the people. The wrongdoings of the descendants and Levi on the behalf of all the people of Jacob that Malachi discusses. They use a process called disputation. Another way to talk about disputation is a rupture between God, groups of people, and being in correct relationship to one another. And prophets, but particularly Malachi, calls out these disputations. And if we were to apply the prophetic writings of Malachi to our communities that do the work of the descendants of Levi today, the parallels are staggering. The ruptures between some American evangelical Christian churches and surrounding communities are destructive. Preaching of the prosperity gospel, false theology of a single ethic of marriage, and the interlacing of anti-Semitism are ruinous to the fabric of American culture. As we consider our political leadership in the United States, we are not in right relationship with Spirit. All of the misinformation about critical race theory and the perpetuation of racism in our schools, the open transphobia and misogyny, the treatment of undocumented immigrants, the erosion of workers' rights, corporate subsidies while denying working citizens a living wage, all the while still denying access to clean air and water for poor, black, and indigenous people of colors, communities, stand as a blight upon the record of this nation. The wanton disregard for the health of the immunocompromised community siblings through propaganda and misinformation about vaccination and mask efficacy has taken us to new depths of ableism in this country. The depraved indifference for the earth through fracking, drilling for oil and coal, the mismanagement of our land through the diverse and overuse of pesticides and monocrop subsidies is causing consequences that we will likely have to deal with for generations to come. Now, although this paints a picture that seems there is only despair available here, the scripture offers us hope. This scripture ends with the reconciliation of God with God's people to once again give us order to the world we live in. Prosperity, peace, and equity are all collectively included in the beloved community. Through our refinement, we will be prepared for this same dream. But how? That pressure and heat comes from each of us doing what we can where we are. We have to place our leaders' feet to the fire. The love of spirit does not have a political side to take, other than the side of the oppressed and the marginalized. We have the single issue activism of justice set upon the plumb line of love in our communities to walk outward to the people. Now, while we continue to do the work of feeding and clothing our children and undocumented workers, we must also refine our civic leaders and demand transparency. We have to apply pressure to our local, state, and federal governments, constituents, and demand action through our petition, and if necessary, our dollar and our vote. When any one of us suffers, God suffers, and our community cannot fully realize its blessing before the coming reckoning. I pray that we are all a part of this refinement so that we can indeed stand firm upon our actions and know that when our time here is done, that we indeed did all that we could. Thanks be to the divine for the prophet Malachi to give us a prophetic insight into a renewal in hope and the future. Blessings to you all.